If the last few years of anime have shown us anything in terms of endings, then one can only imagine the kind of outrage the last 2 episodes of Neon Genesis Evangelion would have produced today. Having the finale of your show be exposition dumps would have normally destroyed its reputation, but by the time episode 26 of Evangelion aired in March of 1996, it was already being considered one of the most important anime in the history of the medium since Mobile Suit Gundam. Its subsequent sequel film and marketing campaigns in 1997 helped pave its way in anime discourse in Japanese pop culture. Nevertheless, the backlash was so severe that even Hideaki Anno seemed affected by it when discussing the harassment in the finishing Evangelion documentary almost 25 years later. And when looking at the episode today, one begins to understand why so many people would both love and hate the TV ending of Eva. A good example would be when Asuka is having her first internal dialogue 6 minutes into the episode. It's unclear as to why this is happening. Why is Asuka back in the Eva? Why is Asuka in a body of water? What threat is so great that Nerve was desperate enough to throw Asuka out there despite knowing she can't pilot her Eva at all? A returning viewer will understand she's in the Geofront, but a first-timer will simply be confused when jumping between each character with few transitions. Not only is there a contextual disconnect between the episodes and the viewer, there is also a confusion about the relevance of the information we're given and the narrative. Learning that Rei is deeply afraid of losing her already fragile sense of identity by participating in the Instrumentality Project is useful for understanding the character, but not that useful for knowing what the hell is going on. It doesn't help that we are confronted with multiple versions of Rei talking at the same time, even though we know that these various versions are dead. The entire sequence leaves one uncertain about the events that are happening. Is what I'm hearing going to matter? Is it relevant to human instrumentality or the decisions the characters are going to make? Given that the next 2 segments take place in instrumentality and Rei's issues are never brought up ever again, seemingly not. The episode gives us a slideshow and reuses footage to only ask questions, though in turn it is important to ask what we are gaining in asking these questions. One important insight we gain is the degree of dysfunction in Misato's relationship with Shinji. We already understand the most explicit tension is the one between her role as his guardian and her role as his commanding officer, as seen in episodes 3 and 4. But there is also a tension between her guardianship and her ability to do so effectively. From day one, Shinji has had to take care of Misato because of her inability to take care of herself, almost like she is stuck in perpetual adolescence in her private life and is forced to become an adult in her public life. This not only adds to Shinji's anxiety that he is only useful when he is needed, but it further illustrates the discontent Misato feels towards her profession. Misato stated that she only decided to work for Nerve because then she could kill the beings who killed her father. Unfortunately, this motivation is entirely founded by guilt from her inability to save her father. So not only can she not derive pleasure from a job that serves to relieve pain, her position and relationships come from a personality that Misato believes to be inauthentic. It comes from someone who is a supposedly good and respectable person whom Misato believes she is not. Something that is to some degree true, as evidenced by Misato's constant compartmentalizing and her desire for intimate relationships as a means of replacing the pleasure she can't experience from work, as well as giving pleasure to representations of her father as further means of alleviating her guilt, as can be seen with Kaji and more uncomfortably with her relationship with Shinji. This culminates into Misato's inability to like herself because her life centers around a man whom she is ambivalent towards but feels indebted to. She continued her intimate relations with a man whom she uses despite his kindness, and she can't properly take care of someone whom she loves so much and finds relatable to an unhealthy degree. This self-hatred makes her act a certain way, which makes her unable to form close connections, which makes her lonely, which makes her perform even harder. The cyclical nature of Misato's problems can be associated with the other Eva pilots, which spotlights one of the fundamental purposes of these episodes, to expose the similarities between the characters and how their experiences can help Shinji reach his conclusion at the end of episode 26. Misato exposes the fragility of adults and the ways in which humans can build complexes that become increasingly more difficult to find answers for over time. Asuka, on the other hand, is less complicated but lacks the coping skills that someone like Misato is able to build with her extra 15 years of life experience. Asuka Langley Soryu wants to be independent, someone who can protect themselves against the betrayal of others such as her mother and father. But by the time her father was remarried, Asuka understood that everything in her life was fragile, that her place in the lives of others is fragile. So she must constantly exceed expectations in order to feel secure. A mentality like this, unfortunately, is also fragile, where all it took were 2 other Eva pilots who were as good as her, if not better, to completely destroy her sense of self. Ultimately, Asuka is a child who has to deal with severe psychological trauma with a brain far more advanced than most human beings. She understands to some extent that her desire for independence pushes people away. This hurts, but she doesn't know how to change it. Asuka's section narratively communicates to Shinji the dangers of constantly needing attention and validation, and tying that to a specific skill even while appearing perfectly confident. Additionally, that instrumentality serves to deconstruct the already existing. The merging of everyone's souls does nothing to solve their internal conflicts, but instead highlight the existing problems in each other. The ultimate form of running away, instrumentality, is not only painful, but more painful than the life the characters already had before. This is why there were no conclusions given during the instrumentality interrogations. If it preserves everything, then nothing can change. Episode 25 not only reinforces its own themes about escapism diegetically through its narrative, but also makes a good descriptive piece. Because you understand the characters to a significant degree, you can now go back through the episodes and understand the underlying reasons behind certain actions, which only adds to Eva's rewatchability without requiring the viewer to be a YouTube analyst. Furthermore, episode 26 helps us to understand Shinji and complete his character arc. Being the protagonist, Shinji's journey is the most important in terms of defining what the core ideas of the show are. Because the final episode of Evangelion includes the perspectives of multiple characters explaining to Shinji and thus the viewer what they should take away from this experience, the path towards Shinji's acceptance of life at the end of the episode is clear to the audience despite the trippy imagery. Each character leading up to this point has emphasized their similarities to each other, signifying that most people can relate to the problems at least one of the characters feel on an intellectual level, which speaks not only to one of the key features of Evangelion, but also of art in general. Art exists to communicate ideas, but more importantly to connect the creators with their audiences. Even though dozens if not hundreds of people were involved in the production of Neon Genesis Evangelion over the course of its airing, Hideaki Anno steered the direction of the show from the very beginning. And the goal for any artist is to connect to whatever audience would resonate with their work. For Anno, it was the otaku and those who felt estranged like him following the economic crash in the early 90s. Seeing the Goliath that is the Evangelion franchise today, one can assume that Anno was successful in his attempt to connect with an audience, even if the otaku couldn't collectively fix themselves. Anno did this through various meditations on the existential problems the characters faced, dialogues on the nature of existence, some shoujo manga parody in the middle of all that, ending with the definitive declaration that Shinji is himself, that his self-hatred was self-imposed, and that it was okay for him to be there. The importance is the scale of Shinji's conclusions versus the heavy amounts of examination of both himself and others to get to that point. Asking the question, is the TV ending of Eva a bad ending, is seeking more from Anno than what he was trying to communicate to his audience and what Eva was trying to do. By the end, it only sought to connect with a viewer, to engage them, and to try to work through issues facing both the viewer and the characters. Evangelion was never about extraordinary human beings achieving great feats, but flawed individuals accomplishing great things, making mistakes, and in the end, understanding themselves. It is because of that Eva was able to reach so many people across the world despite the cultural and language barriers. Eva tells us that we too can accomplish great things, but also that we, in working with our flaws, can find happiness. Thank you for watching the next part in the Evangelion analysis series. There is simply the film to cover, and it will be done. Because of writing projects accompanying my time in the summer, I was unable to finish this episode until now, so thank you to those who have waited for me to continue. Though I cannot say when the next episode will be up. If you want to know when the End of Eva video will be uploaded, subscribe and hit the bell icon to be notified, as well as leave a comment, for I do read them all. I also wanted to thank you for helping me reach 1,500 subscribers. I didn't think even with this content that I was going to grow to that size with my inconsistent upload schedule. Additionally, there are other links in the description that I would highly recommend you check out if you are interested in me and want to support my work. Thank you so much for watching, and take care.